me take the honor to be introducing our panelists for the panel discussion. Welcoming on stage, Mr. Nakul Bhosle, CEO and co-founder, Great State Ale Works and President, Craft Brewers Association of India, Maharashtra Chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to be welcoming our first panelist, Mr. Nakul Bhosle. Please invite our next panelist for the day, Mr. Ajay Nagarajan, CEO Windmills, to kindly come and join us on the dais. Calling up Mr. Abhinav Jindal, founder and CEO, Kimaya Himalayan Beverages LLP, to kindly come and join us on the dais, please. Kunal Patil to kindly come and join us on the dais. Up next on the panel, we have Mr. Mohit, founder and MD, Sevening Brews, to kindly come and join us on the dais, please. Up next, we have Mr. Gurpreet Singh, co-founder and director, World of Browns, to kindly come and join us on the panel. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Rohan Thakre, founder, Bad Monkey Beer, to kindly come and join us on the dais, please. Audience, can we hear a thundering round of applause for the amazing set of panelists that has joined us today for our first panel discussion. Over to you, Manu.
Good morning, everyone. We're starting off our first panel, which is where we're going to have a discussion on the outlook on the Indian beer industry today. Research reports claim that the Indian beer industry is looking at a growth of 9 to 10% CAGR till the year 2026. We've been impacted by COVID in the last 2 years, and the industry has seen its ups and downs. To kick off our BW conference, this panel will discuss growth strategies, government actions, target audience consumption, the role of culture and variant diversity, and their impact on the industry going forward. We've got representation from both craft and commercial beer on the panel today, and the goal will be to highlight opinions from both sides of the industry. So welcome to all the panelists here. I'm really happy to see all you guys here. I think let's just get right into it. Abhinav, if I can start with you. So Abhinav, you've been quoted on the fact that the government must provide an enabling environment for startups to flourish and a robust support system that helps smoothen creases. In light of the last 2 pandemic years, what, according to you, have been the eased regulations that have helped combat market slowdown? And going forward, what would be the regulations you would want to see changed?
That's a fantastic question that you put up. We have seen some states actually realizing and understanding that the pricing of fermented beverages compared to the distilled ones have to be corrected. And we saw quite a slew of states actually correcting the prices towards the end of the pandemic. Post, they had imposed certain COVID cesses on beer as well, and these cesses were obnoxious. I mean, they were very high. So price correction for fermented beverages and then giving a priority pricing regime to beer is key to find the kind of growth that we're looking for. Also kind of wean away from people from high alcohol distilled spirits. And so that's something that's the need of the hour, price corrections. Now, what has been done is not enough. So a slew of things need to be done other than that. An immediate relief that the industry can expect is on the GST adjustments on our purchases. Now we can't just be adding to the coffers of the state and still be paying GST and not get input credit for the same. Now that's something that can set the tone for future.
Thank you, Abhinav. Ajay, if we could get your opinion on the craft sector.
Yeah, from the craft side, I think we all suffer a classic double taxation situation where we pay taxes on all the raw materials that come in, on the malt, on the hops, on yeast, and we pay import duty on that. And then you're taxed again when you sell it. If the specialty malts and the hops are not available in India, why is there an import duty on it that is prohibitive? So if anything can be done on that front, it'll really help the craft brewers where there's easy access to raw materials. So we can focus more on making great quality beer rather than worry about the cost of the ingredients that come in. And then Maharashtra made huge inroads during the pandemic where craft breweries were allowed to distribute beer via growlers and growler bars and home delivery. I hope other states take notice and allow us to do that, and that will be a game changer for, at least for Karnataka and Bangalore, which is the craft beer capital of India. And here we just cannot distribute our beers, and it's just disheartening to be in this situation.
Kunal?
Well, Mr. Jindal and Ajay has covered most of it. But yes, certainly what I see is price correction and a clarity, I would say, in taxation is really is the need of the hour right now. Apart from that, of course, a few states enabling home deliveries during COVID, if they keep continuing that after COVID as well, that would also help a lot in the business growth. That's it.
Gurpreet, coming to you.
Okay, so everybody's focused on what we need to do. Let me try and ask ourselves a question on how we can do it. Governments at the end of the day need to make their money, and they look at industries like ours to squeeze out the maximum they can. Politically safer to do it, there's hardly any objection, resistance from the consumer, given the syntax, etc. It's easy to do it. Now, but it's like a hen with a golden egg, right? So they also want to squeeze it but not kill it. I think what could really benefit is if everybody got together and had structured ways of engaging with the government, the policymakers, on behalf of the Craft Brewers Association, Beer Association in total, and represented themselves on a periodic and systematic manner, strategically, not, if you go to a government or a policymaker and go to him and say, hey, we need price cuts, he's going to look at it as, well, you're emptying my coffer, so I'm not going to do it. So what way can this group get represented with the policymakers, which shows benefit on both sides of the fence? And I honestly believe that low alcohol products like beers and wines are in a great place, culturally, politically, to demand what they are demanding. It just needs to be done in a far more structured manner, where they're represented with the right voices and the right, maths and numbers shown in, that the long-term benefits of doing this is sustainable for the industry and the government as far as revenue is concerned on both sides. At the end of the day, trying to get the consumers away from higher alcohol products into lower alcohol products is something that has been tried and tested world over. The policies do exist. One can look at it. One can look at it over a long-term point of view of what other countries have done in this regard, not just last year or 2 years ago, but over a 20-year period. And look at the metrics and see how it has benefited the consumer, the industry, as well as the governments who make money from us. That would be a great way to start the conversation.
Thank you. Rohan?
Yeah, so all has been said, but I would like to add that one of the things that a couple of states did for the price correction part was to reduce the duty. And indeed, they have benefited from that. Consumer has benefited. States have got increased revenue, and that is the only thing they are after. As well as government should be, more flexible with especially low alcohol beverages like beer or wine. in order to probably get out more innovation. Uh, and as an industry, we should also support these governments in order to, like educate the consumers more, or better equip governments with the knowledge that they lack. So, and of course, like Ajay mentioned, Maharashtra was one. They showed flexibility. They allowed consumer to take beer in growlers, and hopefully that happens gradually and slowly reach out to more states. Uh, One thing I would like to add to all those points is we can encourage more consumers by, if government allows some departmental store or groceries, hypermarkets, like we have seen in developed countries, to allow sell beer or wines or, ready to drinks. So that would really help. That's all.
Thank you. Rohan, I'm going to stay with you for the next question. We're talking about growth strategy. You once said that selling alcohol in India is like selling alcohol to 29 different countries. Would you, when it comes to a growth strategy, would you look at a wider blanket strategy for growth across Indian geographies, at least for the next few years? Or do you rather have a segmented strategy that's tailor-made for each market? And how do these affect implementation?
So I would say we'll have to go with a hybrid model, wherein as a company, as a brand, we have one strategy or a concept, but accordingly to due to the geographical location and their policies, and the challenges we face, we'll have to make our ways. We'll have to change the strategies, and of course, while changing those to the specific geographical location, uh, it's a tedious task and take some time and resources. So the implementation will take time. We'll have to do a deeper study for every geographical location. Um, but yeah, it's going to work like a hybrid way. Unless government tomorrow says that it's like a one country, one policy. Uh, till that time, we feel it's going to be the hybrid way.
Gurpreet, with your vast prior experience of getting beer into every city almost in every state of the country, could you shed some light on this?
Yeah, so the one country, one policy is a very interesting play, right? And a few exceptions were made to the GST rule, and alcohol, excise being one of the three, very few exceptions that were made. But the now what, 7-8 year of experience that the governments have, the finance ministry has on GST, if it works across categories and commodities, then it should work for us as well, right? Now, it's just a function of what is the share the center and the government gets, complicated mathematics, I'm sure it can be figured out. But having done this for across industry, I think it's a great time for the policymakers to look at alcohol beverage industry and also see how they can bring it under the GST regime with existing trends of what each state government is currently making, and therefore figure out your sharing policies. It has a lot of benefits, not just from a one country, one price point of view, but also from the point of view of the GST input-output taxation that this forum over here would typically be struggling from. They pay GST on all commodities they buy, whether it's glass or raw material, wet goods, dry goods, but aren't able to take benefit of that in their sales. Now, there are many ways one can do it, but you can never fully take benefit of that. Now, if this complex taxation regime could be resolved, I think it will make a huge impact on the industry. But yes, it's complex. It needs conversations between state and center governments. You know how those goes most of the time over here. But the time is ripe. This is the time when the economy is hopefully, in its little flux of not sure where it's headed. And everybody is looking at opportunities to try and make sure there is growth across industry. Like, you got to understand, governments don't want to kill an industry. They make money from it. So if it can be sensibly presented to them on how this benefits all the stakeholders, I'm sure those conversations will start and eventually get to where, well, most of Western world is.
Abhinav, your opinion on the hybrid strategy for attacking new Indian geographies?
So I have a divergent view on quite a few things. For one, I don't agree with the growth numbers that we've been quoting so often, that we've been growing at such a rate and we're growing at, and probably will be growing at about 10% CAGR for the next 5-7 years. I don't think so. If you look at the CAGR, the actual CAGR till about 2021, we'd actually be degrowing. And then I think in terms of actual numbers and litters, the Indian industry with the tertiary market would have actually degrown by about 10%. And that would be the weakest across the world. If we were looking at the next 5 years, and if we take the current scheme of things, how things are, and we just let them be, I don't think we'd manage anything beyond 3-4%. So growth has to come from some real action. As Gurpreet said, one part of that action is that we all get together, all like-minded people and our colleagues and friends and in business, we need to get together and make a concerted effort to drive the policy in the right direction. Having said about the governments, we've seen in multiple states, especially in the South, how this industry has almost been killed. Last few years have just seen the degrowth rates being one of the highest ever. We need to see how do we get the availability to the consumer at the right price, at the right place. For me, I think the growth in short term or short to medium term can actually really be driven by availability, by working on the route to market. We still subpar in terms of kegs. We still do not have enough beer. We don't have the supply chain sorted out. So if we're able to sort these basic issues, a decent amount of growth can actually come in from there. Once we have that, then we can work out on strategies for different markets accordingly. And of course, one country, one price, great. I mean, it's a great dream. I mean, honestly, I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Ajay, with your expansion into international markets
Yeah, the
as well.
question is one style of beer or one beer, use one brand for the entire country, or do you differentiate? I think India is a really diverse country, and the northern part of India, there's a greater seasonal variability. There's a prolonged summer and winter the beer sales traditionally we've seen go down. So in the south, we don't have the seasonality. So lighter beers always work. In the metros, you see that people are well-traveled and a hoppy IPA is very well accepted, where at tier 2, tier 3 cities, those beers don't do well at all. But the universal silver bullet that we've seen in the craft industry is the Hefeweizen, right? It sells everywhere. It's 60% of our sales is the Hefeweizen. And you bottle that and sell it anywhere in India is going to work, along with all the lagers. But the metros can absorb craft beer styles like IPAs and stouts and porters and all that we make. But I think we got to keep the seasonality in mind, and also the product that you put out in the metros is very different from what you put out in tier 2, tier 3 cities and the other parts of India.
So since you've spoken about variants, Ajay, I'll just start the next question with Kunal. One of the things that really stood out to me when I saw this panel being set up is that we all come from a different thought process when it comes to the variants of beer we're offering to our consumers. So for example, Ajay, of course, you are from the craft industry, you're the flag bearer of diversity. Kunal, Copter 7 has 3 variants currently, which basically address the broader key needs between them. And with Be Young, Abhinav, and of course with Bad Monkey, Rohan, you have just one key style that you're pushing out into the market, and possibly for deeper market penetration. So my question to you guys is, what are your thoughts behind these decisions that you've taken going forward, and how do you believe growth will come from this? So Ajay has already spoken about diversity. Kunal, if you could tell us about your 3 variant strategy.
I mean, for us, it's very different. I mean, we went quite large scale when we started. And, it's a dream to launch all kind of SKUs and all kinds of flavors, crafts, wheat, IPA, stout, everything. But it's too much to do and manage at one level. So the whole idea was to launch with premium lagers. If you see, I mean, we've used the best imported malts, the best blends to create this brew. And the further strategy is also to stick to the premium lagers and introduce them across the markets that we have launched. Then, how hopefully in next 18 months, you will see a lot of new variants coming out, ranging from extension of lagers to going into craft. That's it for us.
Just to throw another curveball into that question, what about regular beers versus strong beers? We know that a lot of sale in India comes from the strong beer market. I know we have people here who build their business models on the same. So what do you guys think about that?
Sir, क्या है ना पैशन चलने के लिए पैसा चाहिए ना पहले. So the money is in the commercial, your strong lager beers. Okay, I believe I'm not very sure of the numbers, but what I've seen is almost 90% or more than 90% of Indian beer consumption is your strong beers. So I think starting with that can give you a very good base, to build on your dreams and passion and introducing more and more craft variants in the future. I mean, and that's as a strategy, if you see, that's what we have adapted and taken in Copter 7.
Abhinav, just as a stat, the growth figures that we've been talking about, they say that 60% of those figures by 25 will be strong beer.
By 2025.
I'm sure everybody would hope so. I mean, again, I don't see any trends per se that in the commercial space we'd have about 60%. I mean, craft, the strong beer space dropping from about 85% to 60%. Current trends don't portray that. But having said that, whatever be the space, I understand that there's a large set of consumers who have been drinking a particular variety or a style of beer for quite a period of time, and that too from a set stable of products. It's high time for companies like us or others to up the game, give a better product to these consumers, to give them a better option to enjoy themselves, and then bringing in the craft to the space is a better way to do it. And for us, I think the next growth would come from this space. We are pretty focused on creating products that set benchmarks ahead of the curve. Be Young did so with being the first crafted strong beer. And our next strategy, and our Basmati Pilsner that we do by the name of Yavira is another strong beer that we play with. And we'll continue to bring in products that will appeal to this set of consumers and will set benchmarks. And depending upon markets, as Ajay rightly said, seasonality, regionality, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so depending upon that, there will be fixtures of brands depending upon markets. Yeah.
Good.
So a couple of things I'm picking up from here. As far as mild and strong is concerned, you're right. 80% of the business sits in strong beer, but that as well is skewed. If you take out one state of Telangana, that number is 90-10, strong to lager across the country. And Telangana also is because between mild and strong pricing, the way the duties are structured, there's a good 10-15 bucks difference over a period of time. It's come down to 5 recently, which is what caused the big growth coming into the lager mild segment. I know that about 50% of all commercial mild beers sells in one single state of Telangana. Now that's a huge number. But that's also an opportunity for a lot of the craft brewers who are largely playing in the mild segment, right, as of now. I think there's one opportunity is Telangana, which they need to try and... Karnataka is home of beer and all of that. But Telangana is such a huge opportunity along with Goa. 2 of the few markets which are very, very highly skewed towards mild beers. And if craft is, as of now, in its innovation and presentation skewed towards lager beers, mild beers, then those are 2 states one should focus on. The second thing is, considering that India is 80% strong beer and 20% mild, I think even in the craft beer space, there is need for a lot more innovation of beers that deliver on alcohol, yes, deliver on taste with all the innovation, but also deliver on alcohol. Even at the super premium or premium segment, which is where Bud, Heineken, Ultra, etc. sell, and which is where craft also tends to compete at similar price points, right? We are seeing trends increasingly in Karnataka. If you look at the data for the last 3 years, the super premium segment, which is at the high price, if it's an indication to the craft manufacturers, is today selling more strong beer than mild. Now, when the question was going to be asked 10 years ago, we asked ourselves the same question. We said, eventually these trends will change, economic progression, more visibility to what's happening in the world, more choice, will eventually start bringing mild beer to 60% and strong will come down to 40. We aren't seeing that. That's a fact. And we are increasingly seeing, even at a high price point, there is a preference to strong beer. So it's not just entirely economics driven. Maybe that's how it started. But I think there is some taste preferences that have been deeply entrenched today. Rather than change them over a period of time, take advantage of it.
Rohan, what about your 4 years, I think, one variant?
Yeah. So it all started out with, of course, we wanted to get into the industry, and what better to get a premium strong beer, and that gets you the revenue. There's no rocket science behind that. It's simple. It gets you the revenue, gets you started, and so that you can start out with something, make consumer experience it, then eventually move on to different variant styles, maybe a mild someday, maybe something in craft. But as it has been discussed among the panelists, it is a strong market. It is going to remain like that for the better part of the decade. Craft, I don't know, we all need to understand, because India is a price-sensitive market, and craft goes out of the reach of most of the consumers. Most of the consumers, they don't drink to satisfy their palate. Probably they just drink to satisfy their thirst for a chilled beer, probably satisfy their hunger for alcohol. That will eventually change, but it will take a lot of time, effort from the industry collectively, so that we educate the consumers what they are having, how much they should have. Effort from the government in terms of being flexible, so that we as brewers are more, we can innovate, we can experiment, but it at the same time doesn't hurt our pocket. We don't bleed. And it should make business sense at the end of the day. So that's one point why even craft brewers are getting into the strong segment. Even 70-80% of revenues are coming from there. So it's going to stay like that. But eventually, yes, people will shift. Metros are shifting. But right now, they can only take the support of the microbreweries to fulfill their palates.
Thank you. So for my next question, I want to talk about the per capita beer consumption in India. It's historically been low, but while it's still increasing, it is still low. Now, Kunal, one of Copter 7's core beliefs is embracing challenges. My question to you is, do you look at this as just a challenge or also as an indicator of major growth? And if so, how do we bring this number up responsibly? I mean, I'm trying my best, man. I'm trying my best.
Yes. So I'll tell you, this I've been speaking to quite a few people whenever this discussion comes up. If you see everything in India, we adapt and we follow the Western culture a lot, okay? Let it be fashion, let it be electrical. I mean, everything comes there first and then we adapt it and slowly we take it into our culture, okay? And one of the biggest motivators for myself and that I see for the industry is that if you see in the West, the largest consumed alcoholic beverage would be beer and then wine and then spirits. In India, it's totally ulta. Okay. The highest selling alcoholic beverage would be your spirits, in which, of course, whiskey takes the toll. The number 2 would be beer, and number 3 will be wine. So I think in next coming 5 to say, I don't know, 3 years, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but in the way things are changing and outlook of people is changing, beer has, the per capita consumption of beer has to grow, number one. One more thing I wanted to add over here is, lately during this COVID, I'm sorry if I'm, so lately during the whole time of COVID, we've seen a huge change in the consumer pattern across alcoholic beverages, okay? I'm not talking particularly about beers over here. But the thing is, and it's in across all the segments, you know, fashion, kuch bhi le lo, people are spending more, people are going more towards luxury. Maybe the BMW sales must have gone much higher, I'm not sure, but this is what I'm feeling, you know, when I'm looking around and what's happening. So this will also add, why? Because people are more open to explore new things, new varieties now, compared to what they were, you know, I mean, in last 2-3 years, the industry has changed a lot. Okay? And this is 100%, I'm very sure, I'm banking on this, that this is the right time to be in the industry, honestly, you know. And in next 5 to, the industry has just started ticking, you know. It is going to explode in a few years. 5 years maybe. 2-3 years mein kuch nahi hona hai.
Thank you. Ajay?
Yeah, I think if you look at how beer is marketed in the Western world, craft beer and beer is associated with something. So light beer is associated with sports and doing something outdoors. On a hot summer day, you always want a beer. And we are, in the Western world, they're trained to think like that. I mean, if it's a hot day, you want a beer. So we need to spend more on marketing and create that aura of that, oh, this is what beer is for. If you're tired, you went out, you went to the gym, you played, okay, I finished with a beer. Second is we don't talk enough about pairing beer with food. So there's enough opportunity there. We see it in the restaurants, in the brew pubs that we run, where there is beer and food pairing is not talked about, and there's ample opportunity there, just like how wine is talked about. And we realized this also when we started windmills in Dallas, Texas. Hefeweizen goes really well with Indian food, and it continues to be 60% of our sales is Hefeweizen, even in a evolved market like the US. Wow. So that's the learning from there, is that we just don't do enough to pair beer with food, and that's one angle that we can explore. We can, at the end of the day, beer is a FMCG product. It's about marketing. If you market it right, I'm sure it'll grow, and there's enough opportunity for everyone.
Two things I always love hearing. Let's spend money on quality and R&D, and let's spend money on marketing. Abhinav, your thoughts?
If you could, you know, kind of rephrase the question for me and, you know.
So essentially what we're talking about is how do we get the per capita beer consumption up in India, considering it's been historically low, and while it's increasing, we still have a long way to go. And should we look at that as a growth opportunity?
So definitely, this is, that's the easiest start to look at for growth opportunity. But to be honest, it's a sum total of all the discussions that we have had till now that would drive the per capita consumption up. I think a big part, just similar to what Ajay just said, is catering to individual needs, and how well can we align our communication to get the consumer to start drinking that particular product. So for us, at least at Kimaya, we are extremely big supporters of individualism. Whatever we do, our campaigns, our associations are all about you as an individual, and we kind of promote everything that you stand for, and we like to get associated with it. We've tasted success. Our numbers have been doubling in spite of the pandemic, year on year. We are bang on target for doubling our numbers again this year. So I think it's a very great suggestion that has come in. You need to link yourself to those individual choices. Yeah.
Gurpreet?
I'm going to step back. Just let's look at the macro picture here. Yes, per capita consumption of beer is very low. This is one of those countries where spirits outsells beer. And in states where country spirits is available, it outsells spirits as well, right? So it is a reflection of economics. It's a reflection of what people want at the price they want it. If you start breaking down that number by the pure alcohol that goes into beer, wine, spirits, CS, forget the 2% per capita we have. On an actual spirit basis, it's a decimal number, right? Now, but that is reality. Now, let's look at what's happening to India as a country, culturally, politically, economically. The economic outlook to the country, and I'm not talking 1 or 2 years, but I'm talking from a long-term point of view, is fairly robust. We've found the economy of the country has been resilient, it's growth-oriented, so there will be growth. You would have ups and downs for various other, things that happen in the world, but on an overall, if I look at a 20-year horizon, is the economy well stated to grow? Yes, it is. Now, when that happens, what's going to happen? You will have consumers who will have higher disposable income. We have already seen in the last 10 years a huge shift to how people are spending, and it is estimated that over the next 10 years, there will be a 4x change in disposable income because people aren't spending that much on asset creation. Either it's already been created by the previous generation or the young generation doesn't see value in it. There aren't enough people who want to today necessarily buy a house and a car, right? That's the 80s and 90s thinking. So disposable income is surely going to grow, irrespective of how much the economy grows. I mean, the question is 5%, 10%, but disposable income within that is going to multiply, right? The other macro factors that are taking place is for job prospects, there's a lot of movement that's happening from various parts of India to the parts of India where jobs are being created. The side effect of this is it's creating more nuclear families, more single living. The moment that happens, culturally it gives an opportunity to such households have far more occasion and reason for consumption of alcohol beverages in their houses, which otherwise in traditional cultural Indian setups is always a question mark. Therefore, India has the abstinence levels of 66%, which is one of the highest in Asia. If you keep aside the set of countries which for religious reasons have very low consumption levels, right? Now, those are macro factors. Also keep in mind that we have a young age population, one of the youngest in Asia. We are adding to the legal drinking age a population number which is the size of Australia's total population every year. So all the macro factors are extremely positive for alcohol beverage in general. The question then comes to how does beer take advantage of this over and above spirits, because that macro factor of spirits always being preferred more than beer will remain, right? Now, I don't know, yes, innovation at a microbrewery level, at a craft level will help, but you're still speaking to a very, very small segment of the society. Yes, internet penetrations are higher, data costs have come down, so people are that much more aware of global trends, beer trends, taste trends, so there will be experimentation. Innovation from, esteemed colleagues over here will really, really help. But I think the bigger question is if overall beer can start asking consumers questions which start slowly breaking down cultural barriers and creating more occasions for consumptions, that can go a really long way for beer as a category overall. And within that, whether it's an innovation in mild or strong or craft or whether it's Hefeweizen or IPA, they'll all benefit. But I think the bigger question is, can beer as a category start asking questions which can start breaking down cultural barriers? That's a big investment. It's a long-term investment. You will not see gains and benefits in the near future. But if you want growth on a long term, that's where you need to do.
Thank you. Rohan?
Yeah, so I can say make it is a lifestyle drink probably. Like, probably roaming around Europe, you would see people having beer for lunch. Yeah, I understand that's a mild beer, 3%, 2%, 4%, not 7, 6, 8. But yeah, and how do we make it as a lifestyle drink? Market it, make that aura. Plus, it's a very regulated business. So, somewhere down the line, the government will have to, the states, respective states, they'll have to deregulate it. The more you regulate something, the more, people want to do, I don't know, people find loopholes, people do stuff. The more it's available to the consumers freely, I think the more consumers are going to get hand over it. It's a price sensitive market. So we also need to take care of the price issues that we have been discussing today. So the government role comes in. All in all, we have a good potential looking at the be it disposable income, be it the population growth, be it overall economic growth of the country. But if certain things are not, not taken care of, we may not fulfill that potential as an industry. So the industry collectively, along with the government, will have to take certain steps in order to take this where we feel the potential really is. So, let's be more flexible. We can be innovative as much as we want, but at the end of the day, what will innovation do if it's not supported by the proper infrastructure, proper resources? And so, and the brands also need to be omnipresent nowadays with this digitalization happening. But that's a separate topic altogether, so let's not discuss that. So yeah, in short, let's make this a lifestyle drink to increase that per capita. And,
Sure.
Now, since he raised the question of lifestyle, the marketing animal in me got woken up. When I was talking about breaking down cultural barriers, and he spoke about making it a lifestyle drink, lifestyle to me is still a little, top of the pyramid. How do you appeal to the broad mass of the beer consumer? Now, culturally, all alcohol is seen to be evil. Can we make beer the lesser evil? And that's important in what we say in marketing, as well as in how we pitch our stories to regulators and policy decision makers. From a marketing point of view, can we start asking questions such as, two friends sitting Tuesday evening, and the guy suggests, let's go have a drink, and he's like, it's Tuesday. Who drinks alcohol on a Tuesday? So, but beer is beer. It's not alcohol. Can you start positioning beer closer to soft drink? Can you start asking those kind of questions? Right? And when you do that, even policymakers will see that you are positioning beer away from alcohol and making it culturally more acceptable, which allows them to make it, from a political point of view, that much easier to make policy decisions on, which aren't questioned by, opposition or general public. We talked about Maharashtra and doing, very policy-friendly measures in the past. There's one policy they came up with sometime in 2006, 7 or 8, called beer shoppies. Now, licenses for alcohol for a retail outlet are expensive. It's cheaper to start a little startup of your own than try and own 5 licenses. That's the cost of the licenses, especially in state like Karnataka. But the policy they came up with is said, okay, so don't sell spirits, sell only beer and wine, and the license costs, 1/20th of what it normally costs. It allows you to then rapidly expand distribution for beer and low alcohol products. And I recall and Maharashtra has been a state which has had very little growth in alcohol beverage, but for about 5 to 7 years, we were seeing rapid double-digit growths on beer just on account of this.
Thank you. So for my last question, I'd like to talk a little about culture. Ajay, with your brand being a flag bearer for collaborations, cultural associations, music, I wanted your opinion, of course, everyone else on this panel, when I asked what the impact of pop and countercultural associations is with beer. And according to you, how will that help drive industry growth? It'd be great if you could give us an example of any such association that worked very well for your brand.
Yeah, so as windmills, we always believed in flying under the radar. We never went out and advertised ourselves that here's a great beer brand, that you want to come and have the best beer here. It was almost a process of self-discovery and saying, okay, I want to find out what the people who come and seek us out dead-end street, nobody knew where we were, but we kind of created that culture, and that's what craft beer is all about. To create that niche audience, people who seek you out, and we always call that we are loved by few, not liked by millions. So that's a culture we kind of create for our brand, and craft beer is often a manifestation of the personality of the brewer and the ownership, and we hope that comes out in our brand. And we win over one customer at a time. When we started in 2011, 2012, we had a lot of consultants who told us that all you have to make in India is a lager, Weizen, and a dark dark lager, and that's what sells in India. And we said no at that point, that in 3 years, people will not come into windmills and ask for a beer. They will ask for a golden ale or a Hefeweizen or a stout. And we did that. So this is a long journey. It's labor of love. It's a cultural change in India, and we are glad we are pioneering it, we are part of it, and we'll just win one customer at a time and be at it.
Thank you. Kunal, can you shed some light on this? I mean, you guys launched with one of the biggest icons of the country with MS Dhoni. So,
Well, coming back to the other question also and answering this one as well, the way, if we promote the beers, as Mr. Gurpreet I said, that it has to become, not taken as an alcoholic beverage and more closer to a soft drink, right? And associated with sports, music, we were just discussing while I was here on the way from the airport that how festivals like Tomorrowland, AD and everything is changing, And the problem is you don't have any great festivals in India happening. Just imagine if there were good music festivals happening in the daytime, okay? And, the beer consumption is happening over there. I've been in France where my wife has been shopping on the streets and I've been taking beer from the can while she's shopping, So, yes, that cultural change needs to come in, and if we are, allowed to market it more freely, we should associate with daily things like sports, music, dance. I would also say shopping, because that's something great that I've done when I've been in Europe. So drinking beer and shopping in stores and walking on the streets, So that's it. It is a very important angle that would help the beer industry to grow.
Abhinav?
So I think these associations have worked greatly for the beer industry across the globe. You've examples, there are examples galore of all larger or to medium brands associating themselves with sports, pop, culture, and then we can, look at any of the larger events in the world where it's more beer than spirits being associated with all kinds of events. We espouse that very closely, and our associations with music, fests, and adventure sports has really helped us. We get our set of consumers who are young at heart and who feel passionate about anything at all, and we're right there with them, associating in things that they espouse. So it's, I think this association has worked extremely well. It is a time-tested method, and I think it can really work well for all the brands here in the country.
Gurpreet, as someone who's anchored cultural associations for a brand that showed pretty much all of us how it's done for a couple of decades, your points, your thoughts, and some cool examples, if you will.
Sure. As far as associations go, they do really help beer, alcohol for that matter, connect with a certain clientele, certain consumer, especially the young consumer, very well. Music has helped a lot of beer brands do that. And sports is the other thing. I remember a time when all associations debated and discussed there are only two choices. There's cricket and there's Bollywood, right? But it's good to see that especially the alcohol beverage brands over the last 10 years or so have taken up the spirit of music very well, looked at not just music in general or in generic, because there's a lot of subcultures within music, and attracted their consumers, their clientele through associations with them. 20 years ago, Sunburn was impossible. Today, it's a reality. It's been happening for a decade. It's a decent enough festival, large enough numbers. Hopefully, they'll be back with a bang the way they always have been. We participated in that in a big way. I remember somewhere in mid-2000s when an EDM artist was coming to India, and I chose to sponsor it. In my management committee, brand review meetings, I was laughed away, saying like, the name itself sounded so funny, Infected Mushroom, what the hell is that? But 10 years later, nobody would ask that question, right? We were spending crores of rupees in supporting music and EDM because culturally it took off and you had to participate in it. But it's becoming expensive. So I think for the smaller the brand, the more targeted and microsurgical in approach they need to be. And for them, it becomes even more important to understand cultures and subcultures and attract consumers through targeted approach. Because you will have the bigger brands like Kingfishers and Budweisers who will take over, the larger music festivals. They can afford to have a brand ambassador, tie up with a Bollywood star or a cricket star, unless you come up with an innovative white labeling idea like they have and, take one of the biggest icons of India and get him to support their brand. But these smaller brands really need to be far more surgical in their approach. And I think for them, understanding cultures and subcultures as far as association becomes even bigger. And they're already doing it through the route of product, you're right? Through the innovations that they're creating with the different kinds of products that they are launching, whether it's in microbreweries or in packaged good of craft breweries, beers. They're already trying to understand what are the emerging taste segments and what are the subcultures within the product category. If you can just marry that innovation and understanding of subcultures in the product category to innovations and understanding of subcultures in sports and music, I think you can have a marriage that can become very, very strong, really help them build their brands.
Thank you. Rohan?
Yeah, so these, associations with, be it this culture that you mentioned, or let's just say entertainment events, sports events, music fests. So big brands have been doing that world over, and that has driven the growth. That has worked for them. Why we can say that these fests are mostly driven by youth, or I would say, people who have come out to enjoy. They enjoy how they enjoy. Beer is one part of it. India, it is happening, but all thanks to COVID, everyone had to take a step back. But hopefully, we'll see more of this, more associations driving the growth, at least in the urban areas, if not in the Tier 1, Tier 2 cities. But yeah, such things, such as associations, will drive the growth for the beer, and hopefully, we see that happening soon.
Thank you. So that was a lot from us. I'm going to open this up to the audience now. We'll take a few questions before we close this panel. So if anyone has any questions for anybody on the panel, do speak now or forever hold your peace.
If I could just... Thank you, sir. Audience, do we have any questions? That was definitely an interesting session.
I was wondering if we were so thorough that we answered everything in advance.
Hi, I'm Sam Freeman from the Australian Government, and so you were talking about Bollywood and cricket as being industries that, when I first came to India, someone told me there's 3 industries to get into: Bollywood, cricket and weddings, that you can't not make money in those industries. How can we get kind of the tradition of there always being a bottle of whiskey at an Indian wedding and turning that into having beer as like part of the experience at a wedding, to kind of grow the industry, build more experiences around weddings and beer?
Who'd like to take that one?
You need to bring in everything, right from Punjab to culture to it.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to figure out how do I get that North Indian guy who likes to keep a bottle of Shivas on his head and dance at the end of the wedding to shift to beer. That's a tough task. But yeah, it really boils down to how do we make that cultural shift, and nothing is going to happen overnight, right? Now, when beer manufacturers start having conversations which allow beer to move away from alcohol and closer to soft drink, they will make themselves culturally that much more acceptable. At the end of the day, all weddings across India have all kinds of people, right? So you have the elders, you have your peers, you have the younger kids, and there are enough number of places I have been to where there is no alcohol served at all at the wedding, which is where the concept of karobar came up. Because there will be some young dude who will have a car with his boot stacked with booze in the parking lot, which we'd all open and then sneak our drinks and come back in there and pretend like we, just went for a walk. So if we can make the category culturally more acceptable, I think the low alcohol opportunity that beer has will make it more acceptable to being in occasions like at Indian weddings, and therefore not needing to sneak away a drink, but a beer and a low alcohol or a wine is okay to have on the table while your parents and elders are also there. It may take a while because there is a generation which is completely shut to the idea, but the cultural shift that's happened in the last 10 years will take only 5 years for it to double, right? That's how quickly the world is evolving thanks to connectivity and easy access of data, internet, mobility, and all of that. So culturally, our generation is already accepting alcohol on table, even on such occasions, which means it's a matter of time before which it becomes that much more acceptable. The key question over here is, how does beer win within that opportunity that the cultural shift that is anyway organically taking place, how do they win within that? And I really think that is a function of the kind of conversations we have, the marketing stories we sell, the associations we do, the product innovations we make, and also therefore impacting policymakers, which will all come together to make beer that much more acceptable at every table. And hopefully we'll see that old uncle with a bottle of beer on his head dancing instead of the shivers.
I would just add to that, and I'm seeing that happening, and this is happening pretty quickly as we speak. What is also required apart from the acceptability is the accessibility. And this accessibility is what is going to drive this. We keep on getting inquiries for beer on tap, fresh beer on tap in weddings, and this is really becoming a rage. So once we have enabling provisions, we have the accessibility and we work on that. Instead of being, how well can we get the beer to the end consumer? And I think that's going to drive more of this business. And for us, I think that's the future.
Thank you, guys. So I think we'll close. Oh, please, Anil.
Hi. I just want to ask this panel that, there's been a huge debate on craft versus commercial all the time. And, we, from being a neutral platform, we always tell people that I think first we need to work on beer as a concept and, not fight within the category and not achieve anything out of it. So how do you all see this difference and how do we bridge the gap between these differences which will be useful for the beer as a category? I would like Gurpreet to answer that first because I think Gurpreet, from a commercial point, I've always seen this, craft is looked upon like a kid in the, so it's okay, it's okay, fine. We are not worried about that.
Yeah, so you see the commercial beer manufacturers in India for a long time, ever since craft happened, have been debating amongst themselves on how do they get in. They understand the opportunity, they understand the consumers' changing taste preferences, and they also understand that if they don't play that segment, they're going to be left out. Eventually that segment will be big, and it will impact their bottom lines and top lines. So when the first microbrewery came in, for a long time we actually considered and debated, can we get into the whole pub brewery space under our brand and therefore tie up with somebody to help us create this. And then we backed out of it saying, at the end of the day, we are beer manufacturers. This is an F&B business. We don't understand it. It's not our space. So we walked away. But then the next innovation happened when craft in bottled and can started getting imported into India and then getting manufactured in India. And at that point, we really had to ask ourselves the question that now it's here and in a format that somebody else has shown it can be done. The only challenge that these large commercial manufacturing units have is they were built to scale. And they weren't built to have small size tanks to make small batches to small consumer taste segments. So that's where they lose. But they have been studying it very closely. And 2-3 things are going to happen. And some of them, you're already seeing them happen. They are looking at craft as a category and now dissecting it further to understand where is the opportunity to get into slightly larger batch manufacturing. So when we were debating at United Breweries, what is the opportunity in craft, we realized that at that stage in 2018, I think this discussion was, there isn't yet a sizable craft opportunity, but there is a sizable opportunity in an adjacent category called wheat beer. because we were observing that at microbreweries about 50-60% of what they sold was wheat. The answers were clear. It is close enough to lager. It's a little different. So, it was working. And now I would think there are a bunch of other categories which are also developing. But that was the question we asked and we answered. And we said, OK, so we don't get into craft. We'll get into wheat beer. And we started experimenting with wheat beer products. And eventually, UB ended up launching a wheat-style product which could be made at scale. But I can tell you this, it's a great opportunity for craft beer community, whether it's in the microbrewery space and especially if they are in the packaged goods space, because every large manufacturer is studying them very, very closely. The guys who can create a brand, connect with consumers, and it's not so much about how much volume they have, but it's about strength of product and strength of community building. Every large manufacturer is looking at who do we tie up with, who do we buy out. And there's going to be a lot of that. There'll be a fair amount of consolidation. Craft is only poised to grow. So there is a lot of money around the corner. Just hang in there and keep doing the good work you're doing.
Just to add to that, sorry, just to throw a stat that I came across, which I was going to use on another panel, that the sort of growth figures that are being talked about in India, craft is the fastest growing segment there, and it's supposed to grow at a rate of 108% in the next 4 years. Sorry, Ajay, you were saying.
So in a mature market like the US, craft beer is 12% of all beer sales. There are 9,000 craft breweries, but they account for only 12% of all beer sales. So nobody needs to worry about each other, right? Everybody has their own category and you have your own space. The problem with craft is that once you start mass producing craft, it's no longer craft. So you've got to be careful there, and there are different animals, different processes, different personalities. But craft has its own space. It'll never be mass market beer, and mass market will never be craft beer. So you've got to understand the space that you're in and be there.
Just to come back to the question, actually, we got a little digressed. And I think it's very important that all of the craft, whether it's from the micro or from small batch manufacturers or packaged, we need to come on a platform and ensure that our voice is unanimous, it's in a positive direction, and adds value to the industry as a whole. We've not been able to create a voice that'll add value over a period of time to the businesses that we have created, the brands, the love that we have garnered from a consumer, and how do we make it better? So I think just to answer you, we all, and this is a great platform, and I think kudos to Brewers World for bringing us together. At least we'll have an opportunity to forget about everything else and then, share a beer together and then probably get together and say, okay, let's make a new chapter, of a craft beer association that kind of encompasses all smaller to mid-sized craft brewing companies. I think that's what is the need of the hour.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what we were trying to address it, because we want, Brewer World definitely believes in the concept of beer and we want everybody to be there together and rightfully work for the cause. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Oh, I think we have one more question in the back.
Hi, this is Kritika. I'm not sure how relevant this question is here, but I wanted to know how the Russia and the Ukraine war will be impacting the entire beer industry, and more specifically to me as a consumer, how much more will I have to pay, things like that. Because I'm a housewife, and housewives generally, we calculate everything to the last rupee, and I'm very concerned. And it might sound selfish, but if I could have an answer for that.
Yeah. So number one, fuel prices have gone up. So our cost of importing malt and all other raw materials have gone up by almost 40%. And that is going to be passed on to the consumer, unfortunately. Right? There's no way around it.
So I think it's a much larger issue, and I'll probably try and sum it up in a few sentences. One, we do not have the barley that we need in this country, the kind of barley that we need. And we need to come together and have an agro program that kind of supports farmers to grow the kind of variety of barley that then helps us to create better beers, and we don't have to go to Europe to import our barley malt. That's one. Point two is hops. We don't have hops in this country. We also need to look at where and how we do get our water. End of the day, beer is water, and how and what quality of water we're using is that what impacts your quality. But to come back to the pricing, the world is on fire. Ukraine with Russia supplies about 30% of the world's barley. We've already, even pre-war, looking at about a huge 12 million tons kind of a shortage globally, and which is now further accentuated. Barley is doubled. There's no way that any of us can produce beers without barley, and there's nothing. There's nothing available. Also, metals, commodities, glass, everything is on fire currently, partly due to the Russia-Ukraine war, and it's I don't think in short term we have any answers to that. We are equally victims, and our prices are set. Once we go to the governments for, of course, micros, we can adjust, but once you're packaging craft beer, your prices are set for the year, and you have to absorb those cost increases. So yeah, grin and bear it. We'll all share a beer and kind of move forward for the time being. I hope that answers.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
So not really a question. Sorry, my name's Kieran Caramel. I'm also from the Australian government along with my colleague Sam. If you want barley, come talk to me. We got plenty of it in Australia and it's the highest quality.
I hope I get the last year's prize.
Yes, so I'd like to thank every one of our panelists for making this an extremely engaging session, shedding light on a lot of topics, and just hitting it out of the park for the first panel itself, guys, like giving everyone a lot to think about. I also believe that change starts at home, so I think we should all head over and have a beer for breakfast. Cheers, thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you, everyone.